Hey everyone, I'm here today to talk about this book, Tribe of Mentors. I finally got around to reading a good chunk of this book, and I want to give you my thoughts, what I didn't like about the book, what I liked about the book, and just my some of the big takeaways that I think are you might have missed but are incredibly insightful from reading this book. Now, if you're not familiar with Tribe of Mentors, this is a book that Tim Ferriss recently released. Tim is very well known in the personal development slash entrepreneurship and sales and startup and tech scenes online. In fact, his podcast, The Tim Ferriss Show, is one of the top podcasts of all time, reaching over 100 million digital downloads. Now, before I get into what I didn't like about the book, I want to start off on a good foot with the things I did like about the book and Tim as an individual. I love the fact that he released Tools of Titans. It is his best and most widely acclaimed book, and I definitely agree with the reviews and ratings. I definitely think it's probably one of his best books yet, just because of the overall goal that the book's trying to help solve, which is, success in health, wealth, and love. And that's something that people don't cover or really cover well. Actually, it might be health, wealth, and happiness, not love. Anyhow, the book, I think, Tribe of Mentors, is incredible because it covers a lot of people that Tim didn't interview. In fact, he claims that almost all of the book is consisting of interviews with successful people that he didn't actually cover in podcast interviews. So this is all exclusive material versus with Tools of Titans, that he said about 50% of the book was sourced from podcast interviews he'd already done. And me being a podcast junkie, some of it was familiar, but a lot of it was new stuff, which I definitely liked. Also, I love the fact that this book doesn't go into gimmicks. I think one of the things that kind of the 4-hour series, such as the 4-Hour Work Week, the 4-Hour Chef, the 4-Hour Body, these types of books that Tim first put out, the problem with them was that they kind of focused on very quick, hacky, short-term solutions for a very wide mainstream audience, in a sense, such as how to increase your deadlift by X amount of pounds if you've never deadlifted before or done any of that. But that's only a quick hack that works for a short period of time. If you're actually taking it seriously and you go consistently to the gym to practice deadlifting, even just twice a week, that hack is not going to be it won't be impactful at all in the long run. So I love this book, how this book really focused on specific people and specific long-term success-oriented advice. No short-term hacks or stuff like that. I also love the fact that the book is centered around structured questions. He asked a series of 11 questions. Sometimes he only asks 3 of the 11 questions. Sometimes he gets to ask 6 or 7. But he asked the same questions to every one of the people. And I thought the questions he asked were very deliberate and well thought out. And he explains them in the intro as to why each of these were asked and how. And it gets very deep and profound. Like, he really makes sure to phrase the question right to really elicit something really special. For example, one of the questions is, what is your most gifted book? And he phrases it as he does because some of these guests have read thousands of books or hundreds. And therefore, if you were to ask what's your favorite book, that'll probably be unanswerable or take a long time. But when you ask the most gifted, people tend to spend less money delivering gifts to others, so that really narrows the pool of options and really identifies which book is the most useful or they prize the most that they give away. So there's a lot of questions in this book that are incredible. this copy is also very interesting. As you can kind of tell, the one I have has a golden shiny cover. All the other ones I've seen are just straight up yellow and black, like just like plain yellow, not shiny like this one. So maybe I got like a special copy, or maybe maybe all the other ones are shiny and I just think I'm unique when I'm not. So again, I really want to go into some of the stuff I don't like about the book, but again, I want to focus on the positivity. So just prefacing this again with the fact that Tim Ferriss, he seems like a really awesome guy, and I overall like the book. So that's that. And on top of that, there's a lot of great stuff about this book that I will conclude with that I haven't mentioned as well, including some of the people they interviewed. But I got to be honest and say what I do not like about the book, or at least what could have been even better. So I think one thing that's going through this I thought could have been improved was the speed with which this book came out. You know, the Tools of Titans book was this enormous launch and release, and before that he hadn't written a book in quite a few years, and the last one was the 4-Hour Chef, I believe. So it came out with a lot of build-up and fanfare, and it was this like new spin, and I really liked it. And then almost like a couple months later, this thing just randomly gets launched. Now I'm sure he wanted like some type of smaller launch or something like that, but the fact that the format and thickness of the book is so similar, it makes me wonder, did you just release this one and the last one because you just had this entire list, this anthology of advice from all the interviews you've done, and then you just ran out of space in Tools of Titans, so you threw this one together? Now, he addresses why he wrote the book in the beginning, and he talks about how he had turned 40 and that was a pivotal year. But is that actually true? I don't know. I'm sure it is, but I'm wondering like if that's also part of why this is written. I think in terms of the formatting of the book and organization, this isn't something I dislike or like. It's just a comment really, and just something I think you as a potential reader should be aware of and that I should highlight. It's just the table of contents is just a bunch of names, and they're not even alphabetical. They're just like random, completely randomly inserted here. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason why they're ordered in the way they are. It's not even alphabetical, which I think they could have at least done that. That would have made it a lot easier to kind of scan through. But I mean, there's no order to them at all. Like I can't identify. They were just kind of randomly put in here. Like this guy's name starts with an F, and then the next guy starts with a P, and then an S. So it's just kind of random, and that makes it a bit hard to go through, but it also gives you a sense of the type of book this is. It's just a bunch of like profiles, and the same questions are asked. Sometimes only like two or three of them are asked, and I'm assuming the reason is because maybe Tim only had a tiny bit of goodwill with this person, or only had a tiny moment of time to ask this person questions. For example, Jimmy Fallon is in here on page 175. That's one of the first people I skipped to, because I mean he has made such an impact on the world through his talk show, and there's only like 3 questions asked. And I think, of course, likely he probably, you know, Jimmy Fallon's a very sought after person. He probably only had a short amount of time to ask him questions. Having said that, you know, I am very thankful for Tim to do this, because I mean he has asked really vital questions to people that are very hard to reach, that I would love to ask these questions to but can't. And it was just very interesting seeing what Jimmy had to say, and a lot of the others. One thing that you might notice though is that a lot of the names in this book you probably won't recognize. Now maybe in some type of trailer or preview of the book you've heard elsewhere online, you hear a lot of like flashy names being thrown out, such as Maria Sharapova, Tony Hawk, Ray Dalio, Sharon Salzberg, But I think those are there's the names that are recognizable. They're the ones on the back cover. They're the ones that are constantly mentioned. But the issue is that they are also the ones that are like only 5% of the book. 95% of these people I did not recognize, and I'm pretty entrenched in this world of business and self-development and so on and so forth, and music, and I think, you know, it's just a huge smorgasbord of people, and that's great and fine. I think what I don't necessarily like about the whole setup is that Tim, and this is a theme of his podcast as a whole, he just kind of interviews anyone that's good at anything. If you're like at the top of your industry, he would like to learn more about you. And there's nothing wrong with that if you are a dabbler or a jack of all trades, a dilettante, or just someone who's curious about the world. But one dangerous problem with this is that you assume, and this I definitely get this vibe from the advice Timothy Ferriss gives out from all the interviews he's done and like the patterns he says he's picked up. Success in one area and the advice in one area doesn't necessarily translate into a different skill set completely. For example, the rules in politics and competition in the realm of music is not the same as succeeding in the realm of CrossFit, or in the realm of a public speaker, or physics, or being a physicist. And you know, I think the great danger of like interviewing all these different people across all these backgrounds, and then just trying to pick out universal patterns, is that yes, you will pick up stuff that's universal all across the board, like working hard, but at the same time you won't. There's stuff that doesn't work like this, and ironically, there's a lot of examples of this in the book from people who gave advice. There's a good chunk of it, in fact. For example, I love the fact that he interviews Matt Frazier and Katrin Davis-Daughter in the book. These are two of the best CrossFit athletes of all time. They've won numerous CrossFit Games championships over the years, and I'm really glad he somehow got a chance to interview these people. And in Matt Frazier's section, he mentions that, well, you know, you should not copy what the most successful CrossFit athletes do as a workout routine, because your weaknesses are different from their weaknesses. And then he also goes on to say how you shouldn't, CrossFit's a very different thing, and so clearly, you know, the rules of success in one skill set may not be the same as the rules of success in another skill set. Just because one person has said one thing about how to succeed in CrossFit does not mean the same advice applies to something else like chess or sprinting or business. In CrossFit, as you can tell, there's different factors, different rules involved. It's a different sport because every year they throw in some type of new activity, whether it's obstacle courses or some new, pulling device, or you have to flip a 600-pound refrigerator across the playing field. So it's really about CrossFitness in dozens of different categories, and therefore it's really about focusing on weaknesses. But if you were to just read this book or listen to any of Tim's podcasts, and then take the advice from a chess player and then apply it to business, and then take what's applied to business and then apply it to philosophy, and then take something from philosophy, like people love doing this, they love taking like Stoicism or Lao Tzu's laws, and they'll apply it to business. But why are you reading The War of Art or The Art of War and then applying it to something completely unrelated when there are already super successful billionaires who have succeeded in business, who have written books on this, dozens of them, where you can get actual practical advice from people who's actually played the rules of the game. Now, I understand the power of getting inspiration and new ideas and fresh outlooks from some other source, but you should not be using, and I think this is a huge mistake a lot of people make, I don't think you should be using the foundation of what you build upon as from some completely arbitrary other field. Like people love using the art of war to describe business, and they'll use all these war tactics from this book that was written for the specific factors and environments and experiences of the art of warfare, and they're trying to apply this to freaking business or video games. And I understand the ideas, but unless you're trying to completely innovate and change the game, why not just use the mentors with which have a higher chance of success? So again, that's just my thoughts. That ends my rant on that topic, and therefore my advice is, if you read this book or Tools of Titans, I suggest, as Tim Ferriss recommends at the start of Tools of Titans, to simply pick out the ones that interest you. But I would go a step further and pick out the ones that interest you within the category and skill set that you are looking to succeed in. So if you're interested in becoming an actor, read the advice in here by Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Terry Crews. Use that as your foundation, and then if you really want to go outside of that realm and read from other people, do that, but realize and take note that it's outside, and take it with a grain of salt, and maybe just use it as a test rather than some fundamental thing that you base your values and your process on. So that's my thoughts on this. And I think it's a little distinction, a subtle distinction that's incredibly important, that I don't think is stressed enough in here. In fact, the opposite seems to be stressed, as if like everything's universal. And I don't buy that woo-woo stuff. Another thing I love about this book is just, again, some of the people in it and the profound advice they sometimes give. I learned today that Terry Crews was really into self-development and still is. He's read hundreds of self-help books. He's really into the Master Key to Riches, which I bought but really haven't gone through, and now I've picked it up and I've started reading a few more pages of it because of how big an impact that book had on Terry Crews' life. And now he's this super successful actor who's also a pro athlete, NFL player, and so successful in so many realms. Such a positive guy too. A lot to learn. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I think his story, what he wrote in this book, really surprised me. I mean, I don't know too much about him as an actor before I read this book. I mean, I saw some of his movies, thought he was a pretty good guy, pretty successful guy. I don't know if he was lucky or what, but he seemed pretty darn successful and famous. And he just had this incredibly profound, deep piece of advice about how all the actors and actresses he knows, all the famous people he knew that are and were happy, they were happy because of normal stuff that did not involve fame. And his whole point was that before you become an actor or actress, or you pursue fame, you really have to understand and ask yourself, why are you doing this? And for Joseph Gordon-Levitt and many of the others he claims are happy as actors, they did not do it for the fact of getting famous. They already derived their internal happiness from things that even non-famous people, most of society, derive their happiness from: relationships, health, and so on and so forth. And so they did acting, especially Joseph, he did acting because he purely loved the process of acting, whether or not he was famous. He says he doesn't care about the glitz and glam of it. Now, he was also humble enough to admit that there's clear biological and evolutionary reasons why we should rationally like fame. So he acknowledges that it's not actually a bad thing. So you shouldn't be ashamed of it, technically. And he also goes in, be honest about the fact that he, also has a little bit of an ego, and he doesn't mind the fame as well. So I just learned a lot about this guy. He's humble. He knows a bit about the intricacies of science, and I love that. And you know, it was a interesting read. One page, it was like a half page read on what I just described, and I was like, well, that's very interesting and profound, and it really hit me deeply. And I mean, a lot of other actors and musicians have come out about it. Michael Bublé wrote a whole song about it that impacted me a lot called Hollywood. Yet it's something I constantly keep forgetting, and I'm constantly still, you know, at some level want to grow my audience online. But it just really goes into a lot of good stuff. And to conclude here, because I can talk about this for a long time, but I want to keep this concise. One thing that I found in the book from a number of people, I mean, there's a lot of patterns. One was meditation, of course. Another was that a lot of them, when they were asked what they did when they felt overwhelmed, a lot of them either mentioned meditation or going outside for a walk and taking a break. So I just found that very interesting. Others turned to writing specific lists, and then there's often the oddball response that no one else has really said on there or been willing to admit, which came from Ashton Kutcher. He was like, sex and eating food, that's what makes me decompress and, you know, feel better, basically taking a break. So yeah, basically a lot of them recommend taking a break in some fashion, and when you're overwhelmed, writing lists to crystallize your goals rather than keep them vague and abstract, and taking a walk and relaxing. I was very surprised that Jimmy Fallon takes really long walks. One time he walked for 8 miles without noticing with one of his friends. I didn't know Jimmy Fallon was such an active guy, but that was very surprising. Another huge pattern I found going through this book is that a lot of them credit a huge uptick in their performance and success to exercise. And a lot of them, including Rick Rubin, they did not start exercising until late in their life. They did not start eating well, nutritiously, and so on and so forth. So I'm moderately happy that I started fairly early. I wasn't really consistent with exercise until, like, you know, 2 or 3 years ago, but I'm still ahead of the curve compared to a lot of these people. So that's a good sign. You know, I wasn't that super athletic guy in high school or, you know, anything like that. I wish I was, because that way I could have had an even better start. But that's a great sign for me. A lot of them also, they mention the importance of not just eating right and exercising, but also the power and importance of focus. And one person in particular, he mentions how focus really defines his success, and this is something that's constantly mentioned and brushed over. I mean, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett has mentioned focus, but this just kind of helps affirm it. And this person was he was Tim McGraw, and Tim McGraw is like one of the top country singers of all time. He's like super rich, millions of records sold, and Tim McGraw, he basically said that everything in life that succeeds is a matter of whether you focused or you didn't. And to make such an absolute statement, it was just very profound. And I didn't think him, of all people, would mention focus. I just thought, like, okay, some people will mention focus, but most of them won't as a contributor to their success, or at least not as their top thing. And I was very surprised that him, from the music industry, like, it's usually like business people who mention focus, but I really think there's something profound about focus. Will Smith has also gone really deep about focus, and how in order to be world class at something, you have to have a sickening level of narrow focus at a skill, and practice and persistence. And I think I'm really getting curious about the power of focus, which I think is people are aware of, but they don't really truly understand the profound importance. So that might be something I'll blog about and really curate a lot of these ideas on focus. And I think one thing that's emphasized throughout this book, this will be my closing thought, is that advice is just advice. And sometimes you can break all the rules or some of them. I think there's a couple people in this book who really explained this very eloquently. One of them was, well, I wouldn't say eloquent, but it was all right. Ashton Kutcher, he explained this really well. He mentioned how he read the book Sapiens, and it's one of his most gifted books, and how after reading this book, he realized that, like, no matter what quotes or advice anyone says, it's all just kind of like what people think. And he says the book Sapiens, which I haven't read yet, the book Sapiens really explained this really thoroughly, and it just constantly reminds Ashton Kutcher that, like, despite all these books and advice and quotes, sometimes you can just ignore that advice and go your own way, because at the end of the day, nobody knows the truth about what it is to succeed, or what the real laws of the universe are, or if there are any. So I think that's very profound. Sapiens is a book that's been constantly recommended and talked about by many of these business people and successful individuals, including the billionaire Ray Dalio, who has like an $18 billion net worth. So check out the book, Tribe of Mentors. I'll leave a link to the Amazon page of the book. If you go through that link, I'll get a commission at no extra cost to you. Otherwise, you can just go directly yourself. I won't get the commission, but the cost will be the same. But if you want to thank me in any way, feel free to purchase through that link. This book is incredibly interesting and useful. I can go on and on about this, but I want to wrap it up here. If you guys have any questions or comments or requests for me to go deeper into this book or any of the others, let me know. Again, I don't recommend reading it from cover to cover. That's what Tim recommended not doing. He says pick things out when the Tools of Titans came out. Yet I ended up reading the whole thing from A to Z. And what's also surprising was that like 95% of the stuff found in there, I already knew. I'd already heard a bunch of times. And because I'm just like a self-help junkie, I think what's happening is that I'm reaching a point of rapidly diminishing returns where I've already kind of covered all the secrets of success in a way. And I'm really just kind of like looking for those gems that I haven't heard before, which are rare and hard to find, and also kind of just, confirming or disproving any beliefs that I already have. Just keep in mind, confirmation bias is always at play with books like this. The graveyard bias is also at play with books like this. Basically, you can look those up if you don't know what they mean, but basically it means that, like, you can't just use anecdotal references and draw a few patterns from a few data sets, or maybe even like 100 data sets, and say, oh, that means that this is equals success. So take what is emphasized here with a grain of salt. That's it. Hit that subscribe button and let me know what you think. And of course, if you want more details, more secrets, more stuff from me, the best place to go would be my email newsletter, which you can find on my blog, willyoulaugh.com, and that's where my best secrets are shared, nowhere else in those emails. Thanks for watching. See you guys later. You can sign up for free anywhere on my site where there's an email opt-in, and that'll put you into my email newsletter. It's easy to find. See you guys later. Peace.